Let's get peppy. This is PEP 102 coming at you. I'm Chaz Chidello. This is Dr. Dave Smith. Hello, Dave.
Hello.
This is, of course, the offshoot of Planet America, the TV show, which you can see on iView or on our Facebook page, ABC Planet America, or on YouTube. I think ABC News in Depth. I don't know. And also the extra of Planet America, which is called Off the Planet, which is on iView and on YouTube, ABC News in Depth. And this is the offshoot of the offshoot.
Yes, the extra of the extra.
Do you feel privileged to be part of the offshoot, Dave?
I do, but with privilege comes responsibility. And I need to make a preemptive apology.
Oh, yes.
The reason why I wasn't here last week is because I have what would medically be termed a mad barking walrus cough.
Right.
Which has not yet gone away.
Okay.
Now, I'm otherwise fine, but this is one of the least convenient ailments when it comes to podcasting. So if at some point it sounds like we're being murdered by a walrus in the studio, no, it's just me having a coughing fit. I will try to spare Peppers the ugly audio of this, but it might be pretty bad.
Okay, we will be assuming there are no walruses in the studio. While we're at it, as far as speaking to the Peppers directly,
Yes.
we asked for feedback last podcast about your ums versus your yeses.
All right.
And the verdict is very clear. They don't like the ums. So going back to the yeses.
Okay.
And apparently the responsibility is on me to just get a compressor and sort out our audio.
Right. Okay. Back to enthusiastic affirmation.
Yeah. So the people have spoken. This is the people's podcast, Dave.
Okay.
And while we're at it, I'm going to ask the people to speak one more time because I thought a good piece of feedback from Facebook, from Liz on Facebook, saying
What was that?
The enigmatic descriptions I give our podcast. I don't know if you've ever seen the description I put. Like I say,
Oh, yes,
Chaz and
yeah.
Dr. Dave talk, discuss X, Y, and
Yes.
Z, where they're the most obscure possible elements of what we actually spoke
Yes.
about.
And
in
one
no
of
way
these ones
helpful.
got you banned from YouTube. Yes.
Yes, that is a good point you make.
Yes.
And she made and the reason I do that is because I listen to podcasts myself.
Yes.
And I find those kinds of things kind of amusing.
Yeah.
And so,
That is the standard format for, yeah.
But having said that, she made an excellent point, which is that most podcasts don't go for somewhere around 2 hours long and feature all kinds of topics. And it's actually useful to know what we're actually going to talk about
Right.
before you start. Like if you have only a limited amount of time,
Yes.
and you want to get straight to the bit where we're talking about X,
Yes.
it's nice to be able to fast forward an hour rather than spend an hour waiting and not even know what's coming.
How long are these descriptions going to be?
Well, I'll only do the top 3 topics. So even if like today, we're going to discuss a lot of topics because
Yes.
there's a lot of short ones today, but I'll only do the top 3. But my question to you guys is, did you prefer the enigmatic, weird, sort of Ridley kind of descriptions, or do you actually want? I mean, they're much more searchable if they're straight, and it also saves me time. So to be honest, it's easier for me to just be straight. But it's just up to you guys. So in the comments, let me know whether you prefer enigmatic descriptions or straight descriptions. What's actually most useful for you, and I will listen to the people.
Okay.
The people have spoken, Dave. They want you to talk about marijuana.
Okay.
So why don't you start us off?
Let us talk about this.
Yeah.
So Biden this week, or was it last week?
It was last week.
On the
We
weekend.
covered in Planet America, so I'm not going to talk much. I'm going to let you talk. Go.
Okay. Yes, announced that the federal government is going to pardon everybody who had a federal conviction for marijuana possession.
Yes.
Now, there's just a huge number of caveats on this. This does not get you out of a dealing charge.
Nope.
It is only federal charges, and the vast majority of marijuana charges are at the state level.
That's true.
Although this will also apply to the District of Columbia, which
Yes.
has 700,000 people. So there are potentially a lot of people covered by that. They did mention that there is currently nobody in a federal prison or
Zero.
a DC prison on a marijuana possession charge. But the thing about those charges is they follow you around for the rest of your life because so many employers ask you if you've got a prior drug conviction. It's hugely controversial that employers are actually allowed to ask you about prior drug convictions, but a lot do, and use that to rule people out of employment.
Yeah.
This will basically allow people to get on with their lives
Yep.
much better.
And it's hard to get a apartment if you've
Yes.
got a drug conviction.
It's very, yes.
Custody arrangements, like with
Yes.
children. There's all kinds of reasons.
Yeah. Now, the fact that Biden has taken this step really reflects at the moment, complete incoherence of marijuana law in the United States. Because ever since, I think it was 2014, the first states started to legalize it, starting with Washington and Alaska. There've been states that have legalized it, that have actually developed legal marijuana industries in a lot of cases, but the federal government has continued to make it a criminal offense.
Yes.
Barack Obama did not make any movement towards decriminalizing it. Trump, if anything, wanted to toughen federal marijuana enforcement. Now, this has all kinds of knock-on effects, one of which is, now I was reading about this a few years ago, I'm not sure if this is outdated information, but the fact that it's a federal crime means that marijuana businesses don't have access to the federal banking system.
Yes.
Which makes marijuana, which, has always been a cash-only business, continues to be a cash-only business.
Yeah.
If you want to deal marijuana legally, you still have to have enormous amounts of cash on you, which is... It's not a great thing to be having enormous amounts of cash on you at a place where everybody knows that you've got enormous amounts of cash.
And the people, your clientele, are probably on drugs.
Yes.
Also, it's pretty hard to tax those businesses if they're all operating with cash.
It is very hard to tax those businesses. So it is, at the moment, it's still a complete mess. I want to mention, though, because this is always a good opportunity for historical reflection.
Yes.
And I know how much the Peppers enjoy historical reflection.
They love it.
Now, marijuana was one of the first drugs to be prohibited under the framework that would eventually become the criminalization of drugs in the United States. And it was known from the beginning that one of the reasons why it was prohibited was because it was associated with people of color, especially with Latinos, African Americans, and what people considered to be disreputable elements of society, criminals and musicians, etc. The criminalization of drugs in the United States really hit its apex in the 1980s with what would become known as the war on drugs. I think it was actually Nixon who first used the war metaphor. But Nixon still wanted to treat drugs as primarily a health problem rather than a criminal problem. It's in the 1980s that the absolute criminalization of it becomes seen as the solution. And while this is often associated with Ronald Reagan, it's actually George H.W. Bush who carried it right to its peak. It was George H.W. Bush who said that the solution to this is, in his words, more prosecutors, more judges, more jails in order to deal with drugs. Now, one of the things that really spurred that in the 80s was the crack epidemic. So crack is a very, very refined form of cocaine that has horrific consequences where it's used. But one of the things that really accelerated this was the death of a college basketball star, Len Bias, not from crack, from powder cocaine after a night of partying in DC. So that was 1986, and that was such a high-profile death. Like, it happened literally the day after he inked his NBA contract with the Boston Celtics, that in Congress, Democrats and Republicans immediately started writing competitively punitive legislation. And what they came up with was this notorious piece of legislation that made the sentence for crack cocaine effectively 10 times the size of the sentence for powder cocaine. That is, to get 20 years in jail for powder cocaine, you needed to possess 10 times as much. Sorry, no, not 10 times as much, 100 times as much of it as crack cocaine.
And you might be about to make this point, but that is one of the reasons for the massive race gap in jail.
Exactly,
because black people use crack cocaine, white people use powder cocaine.
Yeah, it was very much, crack cocaine was very much in African-American inner city neighborhoods. Powder cocaine, significantly more expensive, was very much seen as a white drug. once again, Len Bias did not die of crack cocaine. He died of powder cocaine. Now, so that legislation had terrible, terrible consequences and is widely seen today as one of the responsible factors for mass incarceration. But what I want to talk about is George H.W. Bush's first televised address as president to the nation, September 5th, 1989. So he had just come back from summer vacation and he wanted to talk to the American people about crack.
Sure.
Now, this televised address, you may have seen it, or you may have seen Dana Carvey's parody of it on Saturday Night Live if you're of a certain vintage. George W. Bush reaches under his desk, pulls out a clear plastic bag of crack and says, now, this might look like candy, but it's not candy. And, points out this was bought just across the street from the White House in Lafayette Park. Now, there's a reason why it was bought just across the street from the White House in Lafayette Park, which was once it became known that George H.W. Bush wanted a bag of crack to wave around on TV, the DEA actually lured an African-American teenage, very low-level drug dealer called Keith Jackson to Lafayette Park, which he didn't even know where that was until the DEA directed him there.
Oh, they called him up and said, come and sell us crack.
They enticed him to Lafayette. Such is the level of racial segregation in DC. He didn't even know where that was on Pennsylvania Avenue. And then they bought crack off him so that George H.W. Bush could say, we bought crack. I don't think he said we bought crack, but this crack was sold.
He definitely didn't say we bought crack.
Across the street from the White House. And Keith Jackson, this high school student drug dealer, went to jail for 8 years.
Wow.
So an absolutely disgraceful episode. But
at least it was for a bad cause.
Yes, yeah. But I am coming to a point here, right? So you can go on YouTube. And watch this disgraceful video.
I'm putting in the homework
of
you can
George
see the link
H.W.
underneath.
Bush waving a bag of crack around on TV. But if you go to the YouTube video that I saw, it also has, because this was a national broadcast, there was also a reply from the Democratic Party.
Joe Biden?
Yes!
Yeah, of course it was.
Of course it was.
He's a drug warrior.
I won't say a young Joe Biden. He's older in this broadcast than I am now.
He probably had less hair then.
He had less hair than I do, yes.
No, but less hair than he does now.
No. He's got a fine sort of stripe of grey hair going across his head. But he says, I'm all on board with this idea of a war on drugs. Yeah. He says the problem is we can't be half-hearted in our commitment to it. Now, I'm paraphrasing here. It's been a few months since I saw this video, but I'm pretty sure he actually said it was something along the lines of, we're going to fight a war on drugs. It needs to be World War II, not Vietnam. And he basically says George H.W. Bush hasn't asked Congress for enough resources to fight the war on drugs. So he was outbidding George H.W. Bush in terms of war on drugs toughness. Now, during 2020, during the primaries, it was talked about a lot. We talked about it a lot. The fact that Joe Biden had played such a major role in mass incarceration and in those war on drugs, tough on crime policies. He was one of the major architects of the 1994 crime bill. And this did come up a bit in the primaries. I thought not as much as it could have. There were some fiery exchanges between him and Kamala Harris, but nonetheless, he basically got away with it. He said that his positions had changed, and it was the African-American vote that powered him in the Democratic primaries.
As I pointed out on Planet America, even in the 2020 primaries, he was still opposed to rescheduling marijuana.
Right, yes.
Because at the moment it's Schedule 1, which means you can't get supply from it for research.
Yep.
Which means that you can't take it off Schedule 1, which is all kinds of problems.
Yeah. Now, we should not begrudge anybody the right to change their minds, especially when, as I believe in this case, it's in the right direction and will help to undo some of the damage that has previously been done. I just wanted to point out that there is a certain historical symmetry going on here with Joe Biden being the one to initiate. It's not decriminalisation of marijuana, but I think it is a step towards federal decriminalisation. Obviously, I don't think it's going to happen in his administration.
No.
It won't happen in...
The fact he's doing this in the midterm suggests he's saving something for 2024.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think we can't discount the fact that this is something of a midterm ploy as well.
Yes, it is.
So, something to try to arouse some democratic enthusiasm. Now that the things that were arousing the democratic enthusiasm over the summer are kind of wearing off a little bit.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where we are with marijuana.
Okay, I just got a few little things to add just around the edges of what you got there. I got a number for you about the states. Mm-hmm. This is an old number. Since 1965, so that's a long time, 29 million Americans have been arrested for marijuana-related violations.
Wow.
That's quite a lot.
Yes.
And to give you an indication of how many of them were for possession, as of 2018, 92% of marijuana arrests, that's state and local included, were for possession.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of possession arrests. As you say, some of the states have already had pardons, like California has, Colorado has, Illinois has, Nevada has. So he's kind of leading from behind a little bit here, Biden, but still leading in a way. That's it. That's the way. That's the first of our walrus coughs. There is no walrus in the studio, I do emphasize. My favorite talking point is from Tom Cotton. This is actually the Republican standard talking point.
Right.
Is because they don't want to criticize it too much because they know how popular marijuana legalization is. But anyway, Tom Cotton says, in the midst of a crime wave and on the brink of a recession, Joe Biden is giving blanket pardons to drug offenders, many of whom pled down for more serious charges. Now, we've heard a lot about this. This is a Republican talking point, that they're not actually... We don't have a problem with possession, with people being pardoned for marijuana possession. We have a problem that really they're drug dealers or assaulters or whatever, and they're just getting charged with marijuana possession. That's the talking point. Now, I'll just quote Pope Hat from Twitter. Pope Hat? He's a federal prosecutor.
Okay.
A federal
prosecutor called Pope Hat.
Yeah. Tom Cotton is full of shit. I've never in my 27-year federal criminal career seen a more serious federal drug case pleaded down to simple possession of marijuana. Simple possession cases are usually people arrested in national parks, the VA, federal property, etc. He actually misses that whole section because he's focused on his part of the law. Right. But actually, the biggest exception that you didn't mention, which I should mention, is this doesn't cover illegal immigrants. Not just not illegal immigrants now, but people who were illegal immigrants when they were charged who are now citizens. Anyone who is not a citizen or a lawful permanent resident when they get charged is not pardoned, no matter what happened to them 20 years afterwards or whatever. That's pretty bad. The reason why that's so significant, because it just so happens that most of the people who get charged are on the border. Right. They're not being charged, unlike what Tom Cotton's saying, not being charged because of they got a more serious offence. They're being charged because they've got a less serious offence, which is immigration violation. And it's a way of getting them into jail if you want to get them off the street. So it just so happens that when it came to, 2013, there's a US Sentencing Commission report. In 2013, out of 2,149 marijuana simple possession offenders sentenced federally, 91.5% were arrested at or near the border. Wow. 3.6% arrested at military bases, 2.8% national parks, just like Pope Hat said. Yeah. But it's actually an illegal immigrant thing. And so the fact they excluded the legal immigrants from it means that is actually a big loophole.
That is a huge loophole.
So yeah, as far as
I'm even less impressed.
As far as scheduling goes, the fact it's on Schedule 1, you might think they can just click their fingers and take it off Schedule 1. They just can't. It's not that simple because if the process is that the Attorney General can deschedule, but after a process has been initiated. And the process is involving largely most of the times it's involving research showing that it has medicinal value because medicinal value puts on Schedule 2, which is much less seriously enforced than Schedule 1. But you can't get the supply of marijuana if it's on Schedule 1, which is a bit of a circular argument. But the petition takes about 10 years. So the only way to get around that is if Congress passes an act. So Congress should just pass a law. That's what they should do.
Yeah.
This should just be a Congress thing. And by the way, just sitting in Congress at the moment is the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act, which deschedules marijuana, also recognises existing state laws, also enacts banking reform, criminal justice reform, and automatic expungement of federal records for non-violent marijuana crimes.
What are the chances of that getting through?
There are 2024, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe that's a surprise for 2024.
Right. Okay.
We'll see. I don't think the chances are high, but Stats Nugget. Stats Nugget. Well, actually, I yelled loud then. It's that's okay. I'll get a compressor, Dave. We're gonna sort this audio issue one of these days.
Yeah.
Here's a really quick one. New York Times. Nate Cohen. He's their little pollster guy.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Just a little aside in his recent article, most recent article, I saw a stat which I thought was amazing. I had to bring to the podcast.
Okay. Yeah.
I want you to play guessing game, Dave.
Okay.
In the poll, the latest poll, the New York Times, in the field right now.
Yeah.
What is the percentage of dials that yield a completed interview? The percentage of people they ring that leads to a completed interview. Take a guess.
Because I believe that the sort of industry average at the moment is around 2%.
So what do you think?
Well, I'll say 2%.
The answer is 0.4%.
Wow.
It's getting quite small.
Yeah.
That's an amazing number. So he makes a point. If you were employed as one of our interviewers at a call center, you would have to dial numbers for 2 hours to get a single completed interview.
That's amazing.
So polls are in trouble. That's all there is to that one. Herschel Walker, Dave. I've talked about this a lot, both on the last podcast and also on Planet America. So why don't you kick us off about that?
Yeah, so Herschel Walker, first of all...
What's your take on it all?
It has to be acknowledged that he is possibly the greatest college football player of all time.
Yeah.
Whenever you see lists of greatest college football players of all time, he's either at or very near the top. And you would think in Georgia, because he was at University of Georgia, this would essentially make him an automatic winner in the Senate. In the same way that Tommy Tuberville in Alabama, even though he was not the greatest football coach in Alabama history by any means, or in Auburn football history, which is where he was, nonetheless, he was such a widely recognized and admired figure in that state.
By the way, I don't feel you need to tell the whole story because I feel like everyone on Listen's podcast knows the story.
Yes.
So just tell us the bits that. Giving background to the remarkable nature of this. And so, okay, it is remarkable how close that race is on a number of different levels. Yeah.
One is that actually under normal circumstances, you'd expect him to be winning it easily. Given its midterms, you would expect that this would just be one of the seats that presidents routinely lose in the midterms.
In the latest AGC poll, Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, is ahead 51-41.
Yeah.
And Walker is behind.
Yes. Absolutely. And, this is not just any replacement level Republican candidate. The greatest college football hero in Georgia history. I can't emphasize enough how weird it is that he is in such a weak position in this race. Probably prior to this scandal, I don't know where the polls have actually shifted at all prior to this scandal dropping. I think that this scandal does hurt him at the margins.
Yeah.
Okay, so from the moment that this scandal broke, there have been people saying this is not going to make any difference whatsoever. And I can see the reasoning behind that because you see the way that Republicans moved in complete lockstep behind him. Now, it's easy to see why they did. Basically, they had nothing to lose from just falling into line behind him. If it turns out, if incontrovertible evidence somehow emerges that he in fact did pay for that abortion.
They've got pretty good evidence now.
Yeah. I would say
the signed check is pretty good evidence.
Look, it is pretty good, but incontrovertible by MAGA standards.
Wow.
I'm not sure. Actually,
You need a time machine to do
I'm
that.
not even sure what incontrovertible by MAGA standards. Oh, you know what it would be?
Yeah.
If Donald Trump said,
Yes.
said no,
sure.
I know that he paid for that abortion.
That's better evidence than your own eyes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Even if that evidence somehow emerged, people are not going to Republicans are not going to hold it against Republicans.
No.
The fact that they fell in line behind Herschel Walker.
No,
because
I've played a clip from Dana Lash, a talkback host, repeatedly, her saying, I don't care if he paid for the abortion of endangered baby eagles. I want the Senate. She was very open about it.
So I think we come back to this equation of it's not going to hurt him in MAGA world, but it should also be clear now that in most places you can't win an election on the MAGA vote alone. Roy Moore was not able to win in Alabama. Donald Trump was not able to win a presidential election on the MAGA vote alone in 2020. The MAGA vote alone in a state like Georgia, which elected to Democratic senators, is not going to get you over the line. I think that this will hurt him at the margins with the kinds of Republicans who were reluctant to vote for Trump and who didn't vote for Trump. And also people who might not have any particular political commitment, but who were drawn to the celebrity factor of Herschel Walker, who wanted to vote for this college football hero. A lot of them still will, but there'll be some of them who won't.
And that's a good point because he offers nothing but celebrity factor.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. And in a race where I think his margin for error was so small, I'm not saying he's definitely going to lose, but I think this puts him in a very weak position. Sure.
Do you have a view on whether Republicans should vote for him or not? Like, as in, do you judge them for? Like, there's a lot of people online at the moment pouring shit all over Republicans, going, "How can you support this?"
Oh, look, that horse is so far out of the stable. In 2017, all the conversation was about how was it that 80% of evangelicals voted for Donald Trump? This man who did not exemplify an evangelical lifestyle at all. This man, we've had 3 wives, cheated on all of them, bragged about sexual assault in the lead up to how can you vote for such an unchristian man who doesn't even know his scripture? It did not matter at all. That's not what they're voting for. And they're not voting for that with Herschel Walker. They are not voting for an exemplary Christian. They're voting for somebody who will fight for them in the battles that they care about. Yeah. Now, the difference between Herschel Walker and Donald Trump is that Herschel Walker really has presented himself as an exemplary Christian in a way that Trump didn't really bother to do. No. But nonetheless, they're not voting for him because he's an exemplary Christian. Yeah. And so, you can complain all you want about the hypocrisy of it, but it has just been very clear for a number of years that evangelical Christians don't feel that their candidates have to be exemplary evangelicals. They have to be hardcore fighters. That is what they're electing. And not that I respect the people that they're electing at all. Not that I, but I understand that political choice and that political logic.
Yeah, I got to say, I am recycling a little bit from off the planet here, but I try to avoid recycling. But I just think it's an important point to make, that is that I think Republicans should vote for him. I think if you are a Republican, like I'm talking, an actual Republican who cares about Republican policies and all the rest of it, and you're pro-life and all the rest of it, I think you should vote for him because he's not going to be the Senate Majority Leader. He's going to be a drone. That's what he's going to be. He's going to be a rubber stamp. The guy's a moron. He offers nothing but a rubber stamp to vote for whatever Mitch McConnell tells him or Trump or whatever tells him to vote for, right? And he can do that. And and that's all they want. Like, he's going to be John Boozman. Do you know who John Boozman is? No one knows who John Boozman is. He's a senator for Arkansas. He's been sitting there for 10 years and done absolutely nothing. He's going to be that, right? And so I think should they give up the Senate because Herschel Walker was a hypocrite? No, I don't think they should. If you're a Republican, you shouldn't. That's my take. I feel like, also, the actions he's accused of in this case here, I'm emphasizing in this case here, they're not that bad. He paid for an abortion.
Yeah, it's completely legal. I support Herschel Walker's right to pay for an abortion.
Yes, he's a massive hypocrite. Yeah. Absolutely. But that's what he's been accused of, hypocrisy. Like, the other stuff that was already on his record that he's admitted to was way worse. Yes. There's domestic violence and stuff like that. Like, that's way worse than this particular charge.
Russian roulette.
Absolutely. It's really weird. Interestingly, the Democrat super PACs aren't attacking him for this story. They're running ads on the other stuff. Like, I've got one right here. Like this, what you're about to hear is them quoting Christian Walker. You can't tell because there's a big, deep-voiced voiceover guy, but they're actually referring to Christian Walker here.
Christian Walker is Herschel Walker's son.
His son, that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Herschel Walker facing devastating abuse accusations from his own son,
saying he has committed atrocities against him and his mother.
He threatened to kill us and had us move 6 times in 6 months, running from his violence. Showing up at his ex-wife's house armed with a gun and refusing to leave. Even making violent threats outside his son's children's party. 6 moves in 6 months, running from Herschel Walker's violence.
They're much better grounds if you're going to object to him than the most recent story. But having said that, even then, I kind of feel like this ship has sailed, as you said. Like, and what I would draw the contrast to, and this is what I said in the extra, was Cal Cunningham, the Democrat. Do you remember him? And during the 2020 election,
I remember the name.
He was the North Carolina Republican candidate. Sorry, the Democrat candidate for Senate. Yeah, he was ahead by miles. Yes. And then some text messages came out of him flirting with some lady. Yes. He was married to someone else. Yeah. And then she came out and said he had an affair. This was like 3 weeks before the election. Yeah. And he wouldn't admit. He admitted to having an affair after she dobbed him in, but he wouldn't answer the question, have you had any other affairs? Which was particularly suspicious. Yes. But anyway, and then and I emphasize, he was running ahead of the governor's candidate and Biden going up to then. Even after that scandal broke, he still was ahead in 22 of 25 polls. Yes, he tied with on two of the others. Yes. And he ended up losing by only 95,000 votes when Biden was he was 115,000 votes short of Biden, and he lost by 95,000 votes, and he was 265,000 votes short of the North Carolina Democrat candidate for governorship. Yeah. So clearly, just that critical tiny number of Democrats fell off him, and it cost the Democrats the 51st seat. Yes. Now, if they had the 51st seat and they could have played cinema off against Manchin, the world would be very different. It would be. America would have universal pre-K. It would have universal childcare as well. That alone would be a huge difference. Now,
so thanks, Cal Cunningham. That's what your sexts got us.
But my point is, if you ask those Democrats now who didn't vote for him in 2020, would you now, in hindsight, have traded not voting for this dickhead for those two massive policies that affect tens of millions of people? Yeah, I think they probably thought that was a bad bet in hindsight. I actually think it's rational for a Republican to support Republicans. Yes. No matter how dodgy they are. The problem is they shouldn't get through the primary. That's the problem. Yes. And he didn't even have any competition in the primary. People just said, he's a football star who Donald Trump likes, so we're not even going to run against him. That's the problem right there for me. I should also say that Republicans, and not just Republicans, everyone does, they do disown candidates when the stakes are low. It's just the higher the stakes, the less likely they are to do it. And I've got a great example. It happened just now. In fact, it happened the same week this came out. The Republicans disowned a House candidate, which was J.R. Majewski. Are you across him?
No.
He was my favorite candidate. He's my second favorite candidate behind Herschel Walker. Yeah.
It's J.R. Majewski.
J.R. Majewski.
Tell us about J.R. Majewski.
I'll tell you about J.R. Majewski. J.R. Majewski, he came to people's attention by painting the world's largest Donald Trump lawn sign in 2020. Like he had this massive backyard and he painted all.
Where's he from?
He's from Ohio.
Okay.
And he's running in Ohio 9 against Marcy Kaptur, who is a Democrat incumbent who's been around forever.
Sure.
Like she's a bit of a time server. And it's a Trumpy district. Like he would definitely be, I think it's Trump +3.
Yeah.
So he would
Where
have been.
in Ohio is it?
I don't know where in Ohio.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's homework. Where is Ohio 9?
Anyway, and this guy.
Actually, I'm going to look it up.
Look it up. You look it up. You look it up while I'm talking about J.R. Majewski.
Okay.
What is it? I'm gonna get his ad up so you can just see what this guy is like.
Their agenda is bringing America to its knees, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to return this country back to its former glory. And if I gotta kick down doors, well, that's just what patriots do. When I'm elected, I won't bow to establishment pawns or power-hungry radicals. I will hold my own and demand that once again, America stands independent and strong like the country that I fought for. Patriots, the cowardice ends with us. It's time to restore American dominance. My name is J.R. Majewski.
For those who are listening rather than watching, what you just missed is he just walking around the Zerd factory, very much like an 80s movie, kind of the place where they deal drugs, they do drug busts, carrying a massive semi-automatic rifle for no reason at all. Just walking with a rifle, just walking to the camera, talking about what he's going to do as a politician with a rifle cocked. And he actually at one point in time actually cocks it.
Yeah.
For no reason. There was no one else. He's by himself. He's going to shoot the cameraman. I don't know who he's playing to shoot. He's by himself in a deserted warehouse. So it gives you an idea of what he's like, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. By the way, the Ohio 9th District stretches along the shoreline of Lake Erie from Toledo to Cleveland.
Yeah.
So it is the kind of place that traditionally has a big Democratic vote, grounded in industrial unions, but which has increasingly been going Republican.
He was also part of the January 6 riots. Of course. He's probably carrying that rifle into the White House. I don't know. Anyway, he said that one of the reasons I played that clip long was, number one, it's hilarious. And number two, because he made a point about when I defended America. Like he always talks about his combat experience.
Yeah, the country I fought for.
That's all he's got.
Yeah.
He's got
I can sense where this is going.
He's got his military service and lawn care.
Yeah.
That's what he has to offer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He said he was a combat veteran. You can see where this is going. He said he was a combat veteran who served a tour of duty under tough circumstances in Afghanistan. He said he once went more than 40 days in the country without a shower due to a lack of running water. Unfortunately, the military says that he did not deploy to Afghanistan, but instead he spent 6 months based in Qatar, where he helped load and unload aircraft. Also, he says he was punished and demoted after getting in a brawl in an Air Force dormitory.
Yeah.
The military says he was punished and demoted because he was pulled over for drink driving on a US airbase in Japan. So,
however, I do not doubt his claim that he once went for 40 days without a shower.
Yeah, that's fair. I do believe that.
Yeah.
The best part, though, is that given what I just told you, there are two different ways you can go with this, and he went one way as far as you can go, which is he accused the military of lying. He also insists that he did serve in Afghanistan, but he won't give us the specifics because the details are classified.
Oh, awesome.
So that's J.R. Majewski. The House Republicans, as soon as the military said that, they just said, "You're gone."
They cut him loose.
They come loose. They took away all his money. They come loose. They're just disassociating with him completely. And now he's falling behind. He's now 538. He was ahead. 538 now gives him a 22% chance of winning. And that was a district they were going to win.
Oh, yeah.
So they were happy to give up a House seat.
Yeah.
But they're not happy to give up a Senate seat.
No.
Which, once again, I don't think that's unreasonable. I really don't. I think the higher the stakes, the higher the standard before you disassociate from someone.
Yeah.
Like I think. But anyway. But what I do think is, I think number one, the Republicans shouldn't be vilifying Warnock the way they are, because they're doing a lot of whataboutism with Warnock.
Right.
Like trying to go, okay, all right, well, you're running super PAC ads about Herschel Walker being having domestic violence past. all the Super PAC ads are about Warnock and domestic violence. Now, do you know his case?
No.
Okay. He got into an argument with his wife in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing obviously there's a he said, she said component to this. But what she says is that during their argument, he began to take off in his car that she was staying next to, and he drove over a foot when he took off. Now, this is from a stationary start, so he couldn't have gone that fast. The police did not lay charges because they said there was no visible signs of injury on her foot. Yeah. There was no swelling. There was no redness, nothing like that. He says he denies that he even ran over a foot, but he said I was only driving slowly anyway, so I couldn't have heard it that much anyway. Yeah. But she spoke to the police at the time because the police came to intervene in the argument.
Yes, yeah.
And this has become the go-to Super PAC ad for Warnock.
And he just starts backing the car up. I just can't believe he would run me over. But I've tried to keep the way that he acts under wraps for a long time, and today he crossed the line. So that is what is going on here, and he's a great actor. He is phenomenal at putting on a really good show.
34N22 is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So for those, once again, who aren't watching this, who are listening to this, that is the actual tape of his wife talking to the police at the time. And and I am in no way defending or downplaying what Warnock did. I'm happy to completely take her word on this. But it's not him running her over, as I've heard Republicans say about 50 times in the last week. He ran his own wife over. Who's he to talk about Herschel Walker, etc. Like, they're really playing it up. And I think if while I think Republicans should vote for Walker, I don't think independents should, because he's leaving aside this incident, he's manifestly unqualified. Yes, to be a senator. That's another reason they shouldn't vote for him. But I think it's okay to be pragmatic and to be cynical and to say, you know what, we want the Senate, to be Dana Lash and say he can murder baby eagles. I want the Senate. I think that's okay. I think it's not okay to act like he's the reincarnation of Jesus, like some Republicans are doing. And secondly, to just say, oh yeah, well, Warnock's even worse, and just make up some bullshit. Like that's why I objected personally.
One of the interesting things that I've noticed is that as Republicans fell into line behind Walker, Donald Trump's intervention in this is just to say he was a great athlete and he's going to be a great senator. And that's very, very kind of Trumpian instinct of he's appealing to the lowest information voters possible.
Well, that's what Walker's appealing to.
Yes, yeah. That is, and this is what Trump is harnessing. So, but I still think, Walker is in serious trouble.
Finally, with the polling, because you asked about the polling, the latest poll, these are the first two polls that have come out since the scandal. Emerson has Warnock ahead 48-46, so it's still pretty close.
It's very close.
AJC has Warnock ahead 46-43. He was behind by 2 before the scandal, so that's a 5-point turnaround.
Yep.
That's the one that Kemp's winning 51-41.
Yes.
Kemp, the Georgia governor Republican.
Yes. AJC is Atlanta Journal-Constitution, by the way.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Warnock has 9% of Kemp's voters.
Right.
So that's that tiny proportion that makes a difference. Walker has 1% of Abrams voters. That's the Democrat candidate for governor. Warnock has 89% of the black vote. Stacey Abrams, the Democrat candidate for governor, has 81% of the black vote.
Okay.
So Herschel Walker, the people he's particularly not resonating with are black people.
Yes.
It's and you might go, oh well, yeah, of course he's a Republican, but once again, Kemp is winning more black people than Walker is. So that's how polling's going so far. We'll see. I mean, like I said in the last podcast, I think this is going to head to a runoff because remember in Georgia, if you don't get 50% of the vote, it goes to a runoff.
Yes,
which will be 4 weeks later.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
I think a runoff looks pretty likely.
Yeah. And the other thing is, of course, the one reason he might not go down so much in the polls might be because the fact he's a philanderer is already priced in.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all known that for months.
Yeah.
This is not a big surprise.
Yeah.
So, I don't have anything else to say about Walker. Do you have anything else to say about Walker?
No.
I want to talk briefly about Fetterman because it's a bit of an update.
Yep.
Because like we talked about way back when we talked about his stroke and how it was and how.
Yes.
How
This is a Democratic Senate candidate
Pennsylvania.
for Pennsylvania.
That's right. Yes.
Yes.
Who's running against Dr. Oz. Again, one of the big issues is his stroke and whether he's recovered adequately. We've seen some information this week for the first time on this. Because one of the problems is he hasn't provided any detailed health records. All he's provided is a letter from his doctor, I think in July, it might be June, just after stroke, saying if he continues with his rehab, he'll be fine to serve in the Senate. That's what the letter says.
Yeah.
No details, right? I think that's not good enough. The newspapers in Pennsylvania think that's not good enough. I think it's a good question why he hasn't.
Yes.
Because everyone's asking. It's not for lack of asking. So why he hasn't shown any more than that? Like, not only has he not shown actual medical records, but he also hasn't allowed his doctors to answer questions. Like, because that's the other thing to say, well, can we just talk to your doctor?
That's generally not a good sign.
Yeah. Anyway, but what happened this week was he had his first proper in-person interview. He's done interviews online, but not in person. You might go, what's the difference? The difference is if it's through Zoom, you can get vocal recognition to type out the question as they ask. Because his problem is not cognition. His problem is, that's what we've been told. His problem is not cognition. It's not that he doesn't understand things. It's that he can't process audio. That's his problem. And so when you ask him something verbally, he gets confused, theoretically, whereas he reads it, it's not so bad. So so that's why an in-person interview is pretty critical. But what they did was they let him have this massive fuck-off computer in front of him to write out the questions as they were being asked.
Okay.
So he's having some help there. But at the very least, we can see, does he have a problem with cognition or not from the interview? Because we have no other way of telling.
Yes.
Because he's not doing a lot of rallies, right? And they're very short when he does. I'm going to play this question long because she asks him like 5 or 6 ways, why aren't you showing us your medical records?
Yeah.
And I want to show you all the different answers he comes up with, none of which are very satisfying.
Okay.
But also, I want you to see, to judge for yourself, his cognition from his answers.
Okay.
Because there is no edits here, I believe. Okay. So this is what we're talking about.
So you say you're on the road to full recovery, but right now, voters really have to take your word for it. We've asked for your medical records. We've asked to have a conversation with someone from your medical team, to interview your physician. You've declined those requests. Why?
Well, I feel like we have been very transparent in a lot of different ways. When our doctor has already given a letter saying that I'm able to serve and to be running. And then I think you can't be any more transparent than standing up on a stage with 3,000 people and having a speech without a teleprompter and just being and putting everything and yourself out there like that. I think that's as transparent as everyone in Pennsylvania can see.
I mean, respectfully, that letter from your physician, that was 6 months ago. You've talked to yourself about how this is a journey. The recovery process can be up and down. Don't voters deserve to know your status now?
As I said, being in front of thousands and thousands of people and having interviews and getting around all across Pennsylvania, that gives everybody and the voters decide, if they think that it's really the issue.
But the voters aren't doctors, right? I mean, look, you have styled yourself as the no bullshit candidate, right? It's why a lot of people are drawn to you. Sometimes that's easy, and sometimes, like in moments like this, that gets tested. So why not follow through on that and be fully transparent and release all of that information?
No, and I said I am putting everything tested. I am being out and being tested day in and day out. And if my doctor teams already said that I'm fine and I'm ready to go on that, then I'm not really sure that's much more beyond transparent.
But we're taking your word for what your doctors are telling you, right? We haven't heard from them in months.
Well, I mean, if they believe that I was ready to do that, and I've been able to successfully do that kind of campaigning, I think that demonstrates what they've said in their opinions were actually pretty accurate.
And I know this is a tough conversation for you to have, but look, this isn't without precedent, right? In 2012, Senator Mark Kirk of Illinois suffered a stroke during his race. After some pressure, he released records. You've been called on by the Washington Post, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, the New York Times. There are a lot of folks asking for this, so why not release the records?
As I said, I feel like, I've been very transparent to the point of what voters could make the decision on whether I'm fit to run or fit to serve.
In what way do you think you've been transparent?
As I said, I put out an evaluation of my medical team, and I've been campaigning and going around everywhere, all across Pennsylvania, in front of thousands and thousands of people. And I think they're able to make their own their decision.
So you can hear. Well, what do you think? What's your take on from that? What you've heard? It sounds okay to me. He's mixing up a word or two, but
yeah, I was actually thinking that sounds a lot more coherent than either Trump or Biden sounded in 2020.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking to myself, I definitely want to see his health records, but I want to see Herschel Walker's health records because he sounds a lot more coherent than Herschel Walker does. He really does.
All comes back to Herschel Walker.
It does. And I'm not being a smartass here. I want to know if Herschel Walker has ever been tested for CTE because he's gotten bashed around the head an awful lot in his career. And apparently he got really high marks when he was at school. I know he lied about his school marks as well. But even aside from his lies, apparently he actually was a successful student.
Yes.
And he doesn't look like a successful student today. So I would like to know if he's ever been tested. So anyway, I'm dead serious about that. But as far as Fetterman goes, I think he sounds okay.
I think he should own it. I think he should say, I'm an American with a disability. I'll represent people with disabilities in Congress, because he's quite openly somebody with a disability. He's relying on this vocal translation software in order to read questions. Now, something like that is an experience that millions of Americans have. Not that specific disability, but requiring
deaf people.
Requiring some kind of assistance in order to to do something like that. I think he should own it.
Yeah, no, look, I think that's fair enough, but I also think he should put out these medical records. I really do.
Probably. Yes.
I mean, 'cause I actually think it builds. It actually, what I think we're seeing there is I don't want to blame Trump for everything, but I think this is the Trump rules that people go, you know what? Don't have to show your taxes. Don't have to show your medical records. You don't have to do anything. If you just brazen it out, you can get away with it. And they're right. Sadly, they're right.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, but what this does do is this puts more pressure on the debate next week.
Right.
Because he's having a debate next week, and I don't know if he's allowed to have the computer with him for the debate.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But if he doesn't, it puts a lot of pressure on him because he is saying as his chief qualification, I don't need medical records.
Yeah.
Just look at me debate.
Having said
so he's putting pressure on himself in the debate.
Well, but this is the thing, and this is one of the reasons why I don't like these debates at all, is because the candidates never actually answer the questions that they're asked. His ability to hear and process the questions is going to be basically irrelevant to the statements that he makes during the debate.
I know what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, and I agree with your cynicism. But if you really don't understand the question, it can be a disaster. And let me tell you what I mean.
Okay.
Because there was one example in this interview,
right,
where you just go, "Oh, if that happens during the debate, that won't be great." I'll play you the moment.
Okay.
You've got a debate coming up in a couple of weeks. There's been a lot of debate about the debate. Are you committed to showing up on October 25th to debate your opponent no matter what happens?
No, I'm not concerned. I believe that's another opportunity to be transparent, and people can make their own decisions, during the debate.
Sorry, to clarify, are you committed to showing up on October 25th no matter what your opponent says or does?
Well, yeah, of course I'm going to show up on the 25th.
So that's a clear example where he didn't understand the question.
Yeah.
And if that happens, where he clearly doesn't understand the question on the debate, that is the kind of thing that I think people would remember.
Yeah, but as I say, I just think that the mental model of what debates should be like is so far removed from what they are actually like.
Yeah. No, by the way, I've got. It's not a stat nugget, but I've got a little stat for you because we were talking about debates, and you were saying about how you just want them to disappear.
Yes.
I'm of the view that should be at least one debate. I don't care. I don't think you get much extra value from the second, third, and fourth debate.
Yes.
But the number of debates amongst the top 5 Senate races, you're getting your way because the number of debates in 2010 there was 17 amongst the top 5 Senate races.
Yeah.
2012 there were 11. In 2014 there were 14, but in 2016 there were 11. In 2018 there were 9. And then there was 7 in 2020, and there was 7.
People are realising they've actually got very little to gain.
Well, I'll tell you why I like debates for having one debate.
Yes,
I think it forces people to pay attention to the election. I think that's kind of your sign that the election's coming soon.
Right.
And I think that it gets you talking about the election to other people.
Okay.
And it gets you looking up further information yourself.
Okay.
I think if there was no debate, it'd be really easy to forget the election's even on, apart from the fact every time you turn on the TV, there's 50 ads.
Yeah.
But I think they play a role in that respect.
Okay, look, those are good reasons.
But anyway, before we leave this race, I want to show you where Fetterman's campaign is at right now because it's closing up. They're down to it's down to the 538 prediction now is that Fetterman's going to win by 3 points.
Right.
And at one point in time, it was like 12 points.
Yes.
So it is closing up. And where we're at now is the stage where Dr. Oz is killing dogs. We're at that stage. Because Dr. Oz, he did research at Columbia University from 1989 to 2010. He did 75 different studies involving animals. And 34 of those studies involved the killing of 329 dogs in total. He personally never killed any dogs, but he was the lead researcher of these.
What was he researching?
I don't know. I don't want to know. But I know there were other animals killed as well. Pigs, calves, rabbits, and small rodents.
Okay.
So I don't think it was animal safety, at the very least. Anyway, so he's the principal investigator. He did not kill any dogs himself. But this is the ad.
Yeah.
This is the main ad the super PACs are running in Pennsylvania right now.
She wasn't given a name, only a number, 6313. For 29 days, she suffered in Mehmet Oz's lab, leaking blood, not eating, struggling to breathe. 29 days of unimaginable pain and suffering until Oz took her for the last experiment. Just one of 300 dogs killed in Oz's lab. Mehmet Oz is unfit to be Pennsylvania's senator. SMP is responsible for the content of this ad.
Not very subtle, that one.
No.
I should point out for those who aren't watching and don't have really sharp eyes, I don't think Dave would have spotted this because we had the little time signal on the bottom hiding it. But all that, what you're missing is a bunch of footage of a happy-looking beagle frolicking around the lab and then being tortured.
Yes.
That's what you're missing. Actual footage of dogs being tortured, right? Now, you might be forgiven for thinking, oh my God, that's horrific what they did to that beagle. And unless you see the tiny little fine print on the bottom that says generic animal testing footage. Now, does that mean that's actual animal testing footage from someone else? Or is it just completely staged? I don't know.
My guess is it's completely staged.
I don't know, but
my guess is that there's not a lot of publicly available footage that gets taken of animal tests.
Probably. But the fact that they went out of their way to film a dog being tortured for this ad just to hang on Mehmet Oz's neck and then say he conducted its last experiment rather than saying he killed it because they know they can't legally say he killed it. Like that's it's getting pretty low. It's getting pretty low.
Is Fetterman going to benefit from the coattails of the Shapiro-Mastriano race?
Well, that's a good question because Mastriano is the most Trumpy of the Trumpies.
So this is the gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania. Now, Mastriano was one of these candidates that Democrats effectively boosted in the primaries because they were so confident that he was unelectable. And if the polls are like anything at all to be believed, then it looks like they've made the right bet.
Yeah.
Because he is trailing by 12 points or something like that. Mastriano, by the way, he was at the January 6th rally, although he claims
they all are.
that he wasn't at the riot. And as we've mentioned before, he was actively involved in attempts to legally overthrow.
What's his lawn like?
I don't know what his lawn is like.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, he unlike some of the others, the really worrying ones that we've mentioned, like Kari Lake and the Nevada Secretary of State.
That dude. Yeah, I forgot his name. Yeah.
Yes, but anyway, he has said it is his intention to lead a coalition of America First Secretaries of State to ensure that Trump gets elected in 2024. And he is ahead in the race in Nevada by 3 points. Yeah. But Mastriano seems to be way, way behind.
I think the answer to your question is, like, I actually spoke to Bill about this exact issue with Walker and Kemp.
Yes.
Because I said, if there's a runoff, Kemp's not on the ticket anymore.
Yeah.
So does that then affect the number of people turning out for Walker?
Yes,
because there aren't Kemp voters dragging him over the line.
Yeah.
And he said, he's American, Bill, obviously. He said no one ever gives a stuff about the governor's race. It's just the Senate race.
I can see how and why that's true.
I would say it's more the case in Pennsylvania as well. The Oz-Fetterman race is massive compared to the Shapiro-Mastriano race.
Yes, yeah. But like looking at voters at the margins, governor is still a highly important symbolic thing, and given what happened in the last election, could actually take on pretty real importance when it comes to the 2024 election.
Oh, yeah. I think it's important. I'm just saying what Bill said.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take this up. I will take this up with Bill, and I don't know how aware people are of the fact that, gubernatorial certification is likely to be an incredibly big issue in 2024. Just one more thing on Mastriano. He made a comment about the Jewish day school that Josh Shapiro's children go to.
Oh yeah,
saying this shows. I mean, he didn't actually refer to it as a Jewish day school, but it is a Jewish day school. But he referred to it as an elite private school, an elite and very expensive private school, and saying, "Oh, this shows that Josh Shapiro is not like us," or something like that.
Like us.
Yeah. I can't, you'll have to check to see exactly what he said, but it was a very sort of us and them thing. And he said, "What I'm saying is because it's an expensive private school. It's not." Yeah.
Sure.
So, that makes me a racist now, does it? But yeah, it seemed like a pretty clear anti-Semitic dog whistle.
We'll no doubt come back to him at another time.
Yes.
I got another stats nugget. Stats nugget. This is now I don't know if you're familiar with the Commitment to America, which is what the Republicans' platform, I believe, is called. It hasn't got a lot of attention.
Oh my God, they're always trying to recapture the 1994 magic, right?
Exactly,
because that was contract with America.
That's right.
But then in I think it was 2012. So after the Tea Party midterms in 2010, and they wanted to keep capitalizing on this, and they're like, we need another contract with America, but contract with America, that sounds like it's too two-sided. That sounds like the American people are somehow equal partners with the government. No, this is the contract from America. We're giving you this contract, government.
Yes.
So they're trying to recapture the magic again.
They are with the commitment.
The commitment
to America.
America.
Yeah. Now, I'm not going into the details of this because it's all motherhood statements. There's no details. It's very transparent. But I'm actually going to I got stats based on the point you just made. These pathetic attempts to try to relive the magic of contract with America.
Yes.
The thing is that contract with America appears to be a myth. I mean, it existed.
Yes.
But the fact that it is what won them the 1994 election.
Oh God, no.
Is it?
No.
Now, I know I say I don't do polls anymore, but I am doing a poll on this one.
Yeah.
I'm doing a number of polls.
Yeah.
This is you'll like this. This is history, and as we've established, the Peppers like history.
They do.
There was a Gallup survey.
Yes.
In early October 1994.
Yes.
So this is a month before the election.
Yep.
That found 75% of people hadn't heard at all of the contract with America. There was an NBC poll in mid-October.
Yes.
That found 79% of people had heard either not much or nothing of the contract with America. There's an LA Times poll at the same time, in the middle of October, that found 82% of people had heard nothing about the contract with America. 1 week before the election, CBS found 70% still hadn't heard of it at all.
Yeah.
The New York Times ran a poll directly before the election, on the eve of the election. 7% said the contract with America made them more likely to vote Republican. 5% said it would make them less likely to vote Republican. 71% said they had never heard of it. So that's just something to just remember.
Fantastic. It just, I mean, yeah, so the 1994 election, it was referred to as a Republican Revolution. What was most notable about that election was the fact that Democrats had held the House for 40 years.
Yeah.
Prior to that point. It also happens when Bill Clinton is the first Democratic president in 12 years. Now, what was really going on with that was the decline of the Southern and rural Democratic voting blocs. Bill Clinton and Al Gore in 92 was sort of like the last gasp of that, but really this was a very long-term realignment that began in the 60s and 70s and was being carried through to its completion in the 1990s. It's also, as I'm sure peppers are aware, very normal for the president's party to lose seats in the midterm election. Often a lot of seats. There have only been 3 elections since the Civil War where the president's party has gained seats at the midterm. They were 1934, Great Depression, 1998, in the midst of Bill Clinton's very unpopular impeachment, and 2002, the first election to happen after 9/11.
And for those wondering, well, if that's the case, smart guy, how come the Democrats held the House for 40 years beforehand? And the answer is quite simple. The Democrat president before Bill Clinton was Jimmy Carter, who came straight after Watergate.
Yes. So the very, very big margin to,
And the Democrat president before that was Lyndon Johnson in the 60s, which was before the Southern realignment had occurred.
That's right. And also Johnson won 49 states. Sorry, not 49, won 44 states in 1964. So, Democrats also had a very big margin. So, and that, by the way, I mean, it's one of the reasons why, if you were betting on the outcome of the House election, you'd probably be putting money on the Republicans almost regardless of what the polls say, because of the fact that Democrats have the narrowest margin since 1955 in the House of 10 seats. You would just think history makes it very likely. You might also be wondering, though, but what is the case with the Senate? Because you might remember, in 2018, Republicans lost 42 seats in the House, but actually picked up 2 seats in the Senate. And this is because of this quirk where only a third of Senate seats go up at any given time. And due to whatever the circumstances of the election were that got them elected 6 years ago, you often find one party defending far more seats in the Senate than another party. So in 2018, that was a lot of Democrats who had come in on the 2012 election. It was a ridiculous disparity. It was, I think, Democrats were defending 29 seats compared to Republicans defending 7 in 2018. So Republicans still managed to net 2 Senate seats despite losing 42 House seats. This time around, it is Republicans defending 20 seats and Democrats defending 14. That reflects the fact that this is the class of 2016. These are people who came in with Donald Trump's election. This is one of the reasons why the Senate race is so close. So just a little bit of a diversion there into going from Americans hadn't heard of the contract for with America in 1994, but Republicans still won this sweeping election anyway. Why was that? Which is relevant information for the race this year.
You don't have to justify yourself. It was interesting stuff.
But anyway, look, commitment with... If I was a conservative political messaging person, I wouldn't be happy with commitment with America.
Yeah, you don't think they're pro-commitment?
Well, the thing is, a lot of conservatives have complained about the replacement of marriage with commitment ceremonies.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
They've gone woke. That's the problem. Even Republicans have gone woke.
Yeah. They should call it the marriage with America.
While you're running hot, tell us
Yes.
about Alex Jones.
Oh, yes. So Alex Jones has been, the victims of the Sandy Hook massacre have been awarded $1 billion
Yes.
from Alex Jones. That is $1 billion.
Well, to be fair, $965 million.
Yes.
$35 million is a lot.
Yeah,
It just doesn't seem like a lot when you've just been sued for $1 billion.
Yes. For $1 billion, that verdict came down yesterday. This was because of the fact that Alex Jones accused the parents of Sandy Hook survivors as being crisis actors. So this was the conspiracy theory that the Sandy Hook massacre wasn't real. It was a false flag operation to take away guns from the American people. This is the conspiracy theory that comes up with every mass shooting. By the way, this was circulating after the Port Arthur massacre in Australia. It's widely forgotten, but there were people making the same claim. So it's sort of universal claim that gets made after massacres, that they're not real, that they're performed by crisis actors in order to give the government the excuse to take guns away. Alex Jones gave that by far the biggest megaphone that it has ever had. That conspiracy theory, absolutely atrocious. And you can imagine the psychological toll that this would have taken on parents, reflected in his $1 billion judgment against Alex Jones.
The guy who got the most money out of this lawsuit was a dude who he conducted. He was one of the first parent interviewed.
Yeah,
and he had a little nervous laugh.
Yeah.
Just at the beginning of the interview, because some people react like that when they're under pressure. And Alex Jones used him as Exhibit A for the proof that they were actors.
Yeah.
This guy blames himself
Wow.
for all the shit that's happened to all the other parents.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how much he's tortured himself.
Yes.
That he opened the door for Alex Jones to do this.
Yeah.
It,
So the question now is Alex Jones actually going to be paying anybody $1 billion?
well, he's going to bankrupt himself, presumably.
Yeah, and I mean, I assume he's going to hide his assets as far
He's already started.
Yeah, as far as he possibly can. I mean, Alex Jones is not an unwealthy man.
No.
His shtick has been extremely lucrative for him over the years, despite the fact he's been booted off basically every social media platform.
There's more lawsuits coming, by the way.
Yeah.
This is not the last one. There's also the Texas one where he had to pay $45 million in punitive damages, although I think that's over the top of the Texas cap, so I think they're going to bring that down.
Yeah.
But there's another one coming as well, so he's not finished.
Yeah.
But, have you seen any defenses of Jones?
No.
I've seen a few.
Oh, yes.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh, of course.
No matter what you think of Alex Jones, all he did was speak words. He was not the one who pulled the trigger. Were his words wrong? Like her words.
Yeah.
Were his words wrong? And did he apologize? Yes. That's what freedom of speech is. Freedom to speak words. Political persecution must end. It's interesting that that's Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm singling her out here. It's interesting that she's the one running that defense.
Right.
The just words defense.
Yes, yeah.
Because Marjorie Taylor Greene knows better than anyone the effect of words, because she has been swatted many, many times.
Yes.
For those who don't know what swatting is, it's when people call up the police and say, oh my God, there's a terrorist, or I'm hearing domestic violence or whatever in that person's house, and they get the SWAT team to go to that person's house and break down the door. And depending on what they're doing, they could get shot.
Yes.
Like it's a very scary experience for that person. And she's been swatted a lot.
Yeah.
It's just words, Marjorie. It's just words. Like if you're using those words to incite someone else to commit harm, then you should be held accountable. I think most people would agree with that. And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene would agree with that if it's applied to her as opposed to someone else in this case. And they were harmed. They were actually harmed. They were harassed. They've been stalked for the best part of 15 years now. Yeah. And like just by internet crazies, it's it's very depressing.
No, I mean, without going into too much depth, one of the big insights of the study of language that came from the 20th century was words are not just representations of things, which is the traditional view, and it's the traditional view of language that underpins that whole 18th century liberal marketplace of ideas, the cure for bad speech is good speech, idea. Words do things. Yeah, words actually have agency. Words are used for purposes. They're not just representation. So, I mean, the just words defense has, I don't think, ever carried any significant weight.
You have anything to say about Alex Jones?
No.
Or? No. Okay. I'm gonna go through this next topic in record time because I was planning to spend a good half hour talking to you about the January 6th committee hearing that was on this morning. I woke up at 4 a.m. to watch that bloody thing, and it was such a crushing disappointment. Like, it was the worst. They spent an hour. It was like, basically, it was a previously on the January 6th committee hearing. It was just this terrible summary, a really bad summary too. But they left out lots of the good stuff. The terrible summary for an hour of what they'd already said. They all took turns just saying bits of what they'd already said, and then they took this completely clearly staged vote.
Yeah,
to subpoena Trump. You go, if you guys are serious about either hearing what Trump has to say or holding him accountable, this would have been the very first thing you did when you formed the committee 6 months ago. Because obviously it's going to court. Whereas it's the last thing you're doing because it's just grandstanding.
Yeah.
They have no intention of actually holding him to account.
That's
or
right.
forcing testimony. Otherwise, they would have done it. They would have left as much time as possible. So that's just a complete waste of everyone's time. And they made out like, oh, this is going to be this big committee hearing. And it wasn't even a hearing. It was just a rehash. So I was pissed off.
Well, Chaz, I think, though, that we need to acknowledge you are addicted to committee hearings.
I love committee hearings. That's why I was so pissed off.
And I don't think you're realizing the damage that they're doing to you. And I mean, look, this is like a case of you have desperately at 4 a.m. gone out to buy a bag of crack, right, at Lafayette Square. Instead, someone sold you a bag of Omo, and now you're really upset about it. But I think you've got some lifestyle things to consider here.
It would have been less painful if I snorted Omo. Let me tell you, I was in intense pain. I was very tired, and I'd gotten 1 hour sleep, and it was like, for bloody Kinzinger to just go on. Oh, I was not happy. Anyway,
I could have told you.
That's all I have to say about.
I could have told you, but I thought you had to actually hit rock bottom yourself.
Well, if this is not rock bottom, it feels a lot like it. I have a very sore ass.
To come back to something that we were talking about earlier in the podcast, the things that were tilting races in the Democrats' favor over the summer because of the fact that they were soaking up so much public attention. So basically, Dobbs and all of the attendant moves around abortion with that, and the fact that Trump was in the headlines all the time. As we said, those things have faded a little bit, and economic issues have reasserted themselves as the central things that are dominating people's attention.
And crime.
Yeah, which is not good from the Democrats' point of view. It's one of the reasons why generic ballots are shifting. I think that this is, like the marijuana thing, basically an attempt to get it back onto favorable ground for Democrats. And as I've said before, there's nothing that unifies and mobilizes Democrats like Trump. By subpoenaing him, this is at least another few weeks of Trump in conflict with Congress.
Yeah, they'll get a tweet out of him. They'll be happy with that. Sorry, a truth.
A truth.
A truth. I got so many stats nuggets today. Another one. Stats nuggets. Talking about hearings.
Yes.
I just want to alert you to the new normal, which is coming our way very soon.
Yes.
The Democrats introduced 4 impeachment resolutions under Trump in the first 2 years.
Yep.
And 8 in the second 2 years.
Yep.
So 12 in total.
Yes.
5 of those 8 in the second 2 years were for January 6th.
Yep.
So it probably wasn't overboard, but still. The House Republicans have introduced 14 impeachment resolutions in the first 2 years under Biden. 9 were against Biden himself, 2 were against Garland, 1 was against Harris, 1 was against Blinken, and 1 was against Mayorkas. Marjorie Taylor Greene alone has introduced 5 of them. Her last impeachment resolution was for Biden for selling oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to foreign nations. That was a practice that Trump also engaged in.
Yes.
Right, that is quite regular.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was Trump's whole idea was, we could make a real profit out.
So what I'm saying is I'm calling in unders on 2 impeachments in the next 2 years.
Yes, yeah.
I reckon there's going to be 3. But we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
By the way, speaking of oil.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have talked before on this podcast about how Biden really didn't seem to get much out of his trip to Saudi Arabia.
No, he didn't. He really didn't.
Yeah.
He got embarrassed. That's what
now we can see how little he's got. Nothing. Less than nothing. Literally less than nothing. OPEC is actually cutting oil production, which is the opposite of what Trump wants them to do.
Actually, I wasn't going to talk about this, but let me just read you one quote. This is something I asked a foreign policy guy when we interviewed him for the Extra.
A foreign policy guy.
Richard Fontaine.
Okay, and I know Richard Fontaine. I personally know Richard Fontaine.
Okay, well, he's a good guy.
Yes.
He's into snacks as well.
He's into snacks.
But when we were doing small talk before the interview,
Yeah.
I started talking about snacks because I always talk about snacks, and he's even more into them than me.
Wow.
He does convenience shopping like I do as well. As soon as he goes to a new city, first place he goes to is a convenience store. He didn't want to start the interview. He just wanted to talk about snacks because he went to the varieties of Coke in Australia. It was fantastic. I love it. Anyway, I want to grow up to be like him, even though I'm probably his age. Anyway, one of the questions I asked him, which I'm going to point to you guys as well, because I want to get this out here, because this is a uniquely me observation and probably very wrong. But I back it. And it's this. I want to read you a quote from a New York Times article about what you just said.
Yes.
About the Jeddah meeting with Biden and MBS.
Yeah.
Quote, while no specific announcements were made during his visit to Jeddah in July, American officials said at the time that they had an understanding with Saudi Arabia that it would increase oil production in the fall and thus lower gasoline prices heading into the crucial congressional elections. Okay, now, let me just translate what you just heard.
Yes.
What they're saying, whether it's true or not, we don't know.
Yeah.
What the New York Times is saying
is
that Biden went there clearly to gladhandle them and also to pressure them.
Yes.
To lower petrol prices.
Yes.
For the congressional election. And what I put to you is that using foreign policy to lean on a client state
I see where this is going.
To influence an election is what Trump got impeached for. That was his first impeachment. That was exactly his first impeachment. Isn't that really, really corrupt?
I think there are some major differences between.
Well, look, Saudi Arabia has a lot more hand in the relationship than Ukraine had.
Yes,
that is one difference. Like Ukraine was like literally completely dependent on American military support. But Saudi Arabia need the military support of America pretty well as well. And I'm sure that Biden. Another difference is I'm sure Biden wasn't.
Biden wasn't threatening to withhold aid.
I think there's an implied threat when you're trying to ask for a favor when your client state is relying on you to a certain extent.
I completely disagree with this.
I would say Trump would say that all he was doing was asking for a favor as well, and it was all implied from him as well. Like, remember the perfect phone call? It's not like he said, "Oh, I'm going to take away your military aid." It was him going, "I need a favor. We're mates. I need a favor." How is that different?
Okay, so for a start, the United States is not providing military aid.
Well, they're selling
Saudi
weapons.
Arabia. They are selling weapons.
I know, but still, it's
Saudi Arabia. That's a very different thing.
It's still essential to Saudi Arabia.
If
America chose to not sell them weapons, that would really screw them.
That's true, but you know who has the authority over that? Congress.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, that is not something that that Biden could unilaterally do.
He can unilaterally veto it.
He could unilaterally veto it, but there have been congressional debates for years over the ethics of selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, and fairly early on in Biden's presidency, they actually stopped selling certain weapons to Saudi Arabia for certain purposes, bombing Yemen. So that debate had already happened, and I don't see what leverage Biden actually would have been holding over the Saudis at that point in any way that would have been equivalent to, here's $400 million in already appropriated congressional aid with a very, very strong and unmistakable implication that we're going to withhold that for.
I do agree there's a power imbalance between Ukraine and Saudi Arabia in the various relations. I do agree with that. Like I want to be clear. I'm not saying they're exactly the same thing. What I'm saying is that I'm saying that they're different degrees of the same flaw, which I feel is being ignored. If that is true, it might not be true. But if that's true, I think that's not great, personally. But anyway, you obviously disagree.
I do disagree.
Okay.
I don't think there's an analogy.
That's okay.
there.
Anyway, I didn't want to talk about that, but you brought it up, so I went with it. I want you to talk about Mar-a-Lago, though, because I know you want to. There was an update overnight, which I don't even know about.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So this is just a few hours ago.
I was watching the bloody hearing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So Trump had asked, or Trump's lawyers had asked, the Supreme Court to intervene in the issue of which documents the special masters and Trump's lawyers can review. So to recap the whole saga, Eileen Cannon, who was this judge appointed by Trump, acceded to the demand to appoint a special master who would review these documents that were taken from Mar-a-Lago. In the initial version of this, this would mean that that the Justice Department wouldn't have been able to use these documents in an investigation. But there was a subsequent ruling saying that the documents the documents marked classified could continue to be used in an investigation. It was the 11th Circuit Appeals Court said that. So they were the ones who said that the classified documents could continue to be used.
Yes.
They also said that I think there's about 100 documents which could not be reviewed by the special master.
They said the special master had no right to look over the classified documents.
Yes, had no right.
He could look over all the other documents. But
Yes,
not the
Sorry,
classified documents.
I am getting a little bit.
That's okay.
A little bit tangled up here. Yeah. And Trump's lawyers certainly couldn't look at it. So Trump's lawyers have been wanting to look at this.
Yes.
So, Trump's lawyers asked the Supreme Court to intervene, saying that the 11th Circuit Court had no jurisdictional right to make this ruling. The Supreme Court came back with a one-sentence rejection.
Wow.
Of it.
And you know who the judge is in charge of Florida?
Thomas.
Yeah.
Yes, because it
Clarence
said
Thomas.
the sentence was, this request was made to Thomas, who presented it to the court, and the court said no.
Yeah.
Paraphrase.
Oh, there you go.
But so, and this is not the first time that the Supreme Court has essentially refused to block on behalf of Trump. When it comes to, not the first time that Trump has asked the Supreme Court to essentially stop the flow of information in some way, and the Supreme Court has said no. And in fact, if we go all the way back to the election and look at the one case that made it to the Supreme Court, which was the Texas-led lawsuit against Pennsylvania, once again, the Supreme Court just said no in very short terms.
They got no loyalty.
So, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, I mean, let's look at this game theoretically. Right, okay, the phrase time for some game theory became notorious in 2020, especially because no game theory at all was involved in that analysis.
Can I just say, before he gives the game theory, if I was doing enigmatic descriptions of this particular podcast, I would definitely cite game theory. Dave talks game theory.
Right.
But I'm going to give you a taste of straightforward descriptions so you can see which one you prefer.
Yes.
Make sure you put in the comments. Tell us the game theory, Dave.
Well, okay, when you appoint a Supreme Court justice, you're appointing them to, first of all, the highest position they can possibly go in the judiciary. Second, you're appointing them for life.
Yes.
That means, in very simple terms, as soon as you do that, they owe you nothing.
Yeah.
You can't draw on them for any favors because you can't do anything to them. You can't not renew their appointment to the Supreme Court. You can't promise them some sort of higher position because there is no higher position. You put them in the highest possible position for life. That means they have no reason whatsoever to perform your bidding after you have put them there. Yeah. So unlike other lower level judges, so Eileen Cannon, she still wants to go up the tree further, and she is going to do that with either Trump's patronage or some other form of MAGA patronage. So the lower level judges, yes, they are still going to be very loyal to you, but Supreme Court justices are primarily going to be loyal to their own agendas, and this is when people talk about Trumpism without Trump, I think where you're most actually likely to see that is in the Supreme Court, where they actually are going to push what we might recognize as Trumpian ideas. But they don't actually have any commitment to Trump himself. With the possible exception of Thomas, most of them probably kind of want Trump to go away so that they can just get on with the agenda.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't think Gorsuch is a huge Trumpist.
No. So far, we're just not seeing the Supreme Court being willing to do any favors for Trump whatsoever. So anyway, the lesson for this is that if you want to actually try to put people in your pocket by appointing them to certain positions, don't do it by appointing them to the highest possible position for life, because they have no loyalty to you once they have got into that position.
Hard lesson for Trump to learn. I'm going to throw in a couple of extra things on the Mar-a-Lago.
Yes.
We've finally, if you believe Maggie Haberman, we've finally seen some indication of why Trump might have held on to those documents. Because that's been the question we've asked throughout.
Yes,
Why has he put himself in legal jeopardy? She reckons, in a recent article, that the reason for him keeping the docs is that Trump was holding them hostage to save the documents, to swap them for the magical documents that he thinks exist that would prove Russiagate was a hoax cooked up by the FBI. That's what she reckons. She reckons, and I read what my favorite quote from the article. Mr. Trump did not appear to know specifically what he thought the archives had, only that there were items he wanted.
Right.
So he thinks there's some magical documents out there that will prove the FBI cooked up the whole of the Russiagate thing. And he was hoping to trade the documents he kept for those documents. According to Maggie Haberman. I don't know if that's true, but that's the first time I've seen anything that at least even vaguely makes sense as a potential motive.
Yeah,
so I'll just throw it out there. Whether it's true or not, I don't know.
Could be. And obviously, I mean, there's, Maggie Haberman is one of the most respected journalists on the Trump beat. There's been a huge amount of publicity about her book. She has often turned out to be right.
Yeah. You'd say she doesn't suffer for access, that's for sure.
Yeah. Having said all that, I actually went to Amazon. I thought, okay, I should buy and read Maggie Haberman's book. I just couldn't do it. I cannot bring myself to read another book about Trump.
Yeah.
I just can't.
I'll be honest, I can't stand these gossip books, like the Bob Woodward books, the Maggie Haberman books, the whole this is what really happened kind of books. I'm not into behind the scenes. I'm into policy. I'm into committee hearings.
Yes.
so I'm into like legislation.
Yeah.
I can't read those books.
My daughter loves them. As I've recommended before, Mary Trump's book is probably the best one of these, because it is actually sort of bringing new insight to the table. But yeah, most of them I think we can ignore.
They're not on the Dr. Dave reading list. I'll tell you that. Mary Trump's one is.
Trump's one.
But the rest are not.
Mary Trump's one. The other one I would recommend, which was written before Trump's presidency, is David K. Johnston's book, The Making of Donald Trump.
Do you want me to put it on the list?
I think it might already be on the list. But if it's not, put it on the list.
Okay, onto the
list. Which is about Trump's business career prior to the presidency. That one I think is worth reading. But other than those two,
that list is in the blurb underneath the Facebook and YouTube videos if you are interested, if you're a newcomer.
I'm going to need to go pretty soon.
Yeah, you said 11:45. Yeah, we've got 15 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm watching the clock. Don't worry. Just quickly on the Mar-a-Lago beat as well. J.I. Bratt, who is the department's DOJ's counterintelligence head of operations. Apparently, he told Trump's lawyers recently that the department believes Trump hasn't returned all the documents yet. That is interesting.
That is very interesting.
If you give any credence to my argument that the only consideration they would be having right now about whether to charge them or not is whether they can prove intent.
Yes.
Which I think is the biggest issue. If I might be wrong. If you give any credence to that, if Trump is going to argue that he didn't know before that he had no claim to those documents, he sure as hell can't argue that now.
Yes.
So if he's still got documents and he hasn't handed them over yet, he better hope they don't find those documents now. Because I don't see how you could possibly get out of escape a charge if there were more documents that haven't been found yet. So I'll just flag that right now. And the other thing is the person the lawyer who signed that stat deck saying that way back in July was saying, "Oh, we've given you all the documents now." Yeah. You might be wondering what happened to that lawyer.
Yes,
that lawyer would be in a lot of trouble. That's Christina Bob.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, who's she's 20-something sort of be a lawyer who she's a commentator on Newsmax as well.
Yes,
real favorite of Trump's. Anyway, she's trying to throw every other lawyer overboard desperately at the moment. I'm going to read you some quotes from the New York Times.
Yes.
The lawyer M. Everett Corcoran met Miss Bob at the president's residence and private club in Florida and asked her to sign a statement for the department that the Trump legal team had conducted a diligent search of Mar-a-Lago and found only a few files that had not been returned to the government. Wait a minute, I don't know you, Miss Bob replied to Mr. Corcoran's request, according to a person to whom she later recounted the episode.
Wow.
I'm sure it's not her. She later complained that she did not have a full grasp of what was going on around her when she signed the document.
Doesn't sound like it.
No. She told them that another Trump lawyer, Boris Epstein, contacted her the night before she signed the attestation and connected her with Mr. Corcoran. Miss Bob, who was living in Florida, was told that she needed to go to Mar-a-Lago the next day to deal with an unspecified legal matter for Mr. Trump. In her meeting with the department, Miss Bob emphasized that she was working as part of a team rather than as a solo actor when she signed the statement attesting the return of all the documents. Mr. Corcoran, she told the Justice Department, had walked her through how he had conducted a search of a storage facility at Mar-a-Lago for the documents. She said she'd believed at the time she signed the attestation in June that it was accurate.
Wow.
Now, you think, oh, she's throwing everyone over the bus. Overboard.
Yeah.
She's not throwing everyone overboard.
No.
Guess who she's not throwing overboard?
Who?
Quote, she told investigators that before she signed the attestation, she heard Mr. Trump tell Mr. Corcoran that they should cooperate fully with the Justice Department
of course.
and give prosecutors what they wanted. I'm sure that's exactly what Trump said.
That sounds exactly like something that Mr. Trump would say.
Yeah, I found that quite funny.
Yeah.
And and just one more thing before we leave Trump. Another truth update.
Yes.
This is one of his truths. Kelly Shabaka is doing very well in Alaska, probably leading horrendously bad Senator Lisa Murkowski, a Republican, barely. The Democrat has no chance, and yet the old broken crow, Mitchell McConnell, is authorizing $9 million to be spent in order to beat a great Republican, Kelly, instead of $9 million that could be used for Blake Masters and other Republicans, that with this money could beat their Democrat opponent. Isn't it ironic? The reason I read you that is because this is a little update to one of my hobby horses that I've been pushing for the last month, which is, yes, it is ironic that you, Mr. Trump, have a much, much bigger super PAC than Mitch McConnell. And you keep on bitching that he isn't funding Blake Masters, who was your endorsed candidate, and you haven't spent 1 cent on. Not 1 cent. And the most depressing thing is when you look at the tweet of that.
Yes.
Because, I think it was Hemingway retweeted it.
Yeah.
You look at all the comments.
Yeah.
Hundreds of comments of people going, yeah, Trump's right. Yeah, Trump's right. Not one of them has even thought of the most obvious point about that. Mate, dude, why don't you fund them? You're richer than
Are you seriously expecting
I know.
commenters on a Trump truth?
No, but it was on a Twitter retweet of a Trump truth, but still Trump supporters.
Are you seriously expecting that?
Yeah, right.
Hang on a minute here. Actually, Mr. Trump.
That's fine. Okay, all right. Okay, you made a good point about us having to end soon, so I am going to, let's see, well, the things that I want to talk about, I'm going to get in here. I'm going to, I've got a few bits of homework just for once. I'm the one who's assigning articles to read, which I want you guys to have a look at.
Yeah.
One is really good piece. I was going to talk a bit about Ukraine, but all I want to say is I'm going to point you to a piece about Ukraine, about the Kerch Bridge being been blown up.
Yep.
Because I thought it was a really good argument, which I'll summarize very briefly here.
Yep.
That this is a microcosm of what Ukraine's doing right and what Russia's doing wrong in this war, which is what the Kerch Bridge had great military significance because it is the only thing that connects two different bits of Russian land, and they can't supply one without the other.
Yes,
without the bridge, and so it's a great strategic. It basically splits their troops.
Yep.
Great strategic importance. No one thought not no one. The Russians didn't think they could do it.
Yep.
They didn't see it coming.
Yep.
There was great secrecy.
Yes.
No one saw it coming. They blew it up with apparently a truck bomb. So really, really cheap.
Yep.
And everyone was on side because it's a military target.
Yes.
So it was maximum effectiveness, minimum cost.
Yep.
And that's a great example of flexibility and intelligence from the Ukrainian forces.
Yes.
By contrast, Russia's response to that
Yes.
was then to bomb the shit out of a bunch of Ukrainian cities,
Yes.
civilian targets,
Yes.
like electricity stations and bridges and parks
Yes.
and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Zero military significance.
Yeah.
Incredible cost because they only got Ukraine intercepted 43 of 83
Yes.
missiles.
Yep.
Each of those missiles is worth like $10 million.
Yes.
Right. So incredible cost.
Yes.
Makes Russia look like the bad guy and only makes it doesn't.
I think Russia was already doing
But
a
even more
pretty
so.
good job of that. Yes.
Even more so.
Yeah.
Like and there's just and it solidifies Ukraine's desire to just go even harder.
Yes.
But of zero consequence for Russia, like positive consequence.
Yeah.
And also, so very expensive, achieves nothing, just a temper tantrum, and it's kind of dumb.
I mean, a lot of the analysis of that was that Putin was essentially trying to appease hardliners within Russia. That what hardliners within Russia wanted to see was retaliation against Ukrainian civilians for the bridge being blown up. That what they think Russia should have been doing from the start is waging a far more terroristic war where basically you win by completely terrorizing the population.
But they're not going to win doing that.
No, I don't think that they're going.
Not while they gain weapons from America.
I don't think they're going to win, but apparently at least one of Putin's hardline allies thought that this was great. Yeah. This was the Chechenian leader who often gets brought up in this, who made some statement saying, oh, like now I'm convinced that Russia's actually fighting the war the way that I want them to.
Well, I'm glad he's happy.
Yes.
Anyway, I'll point you to that article if you're interested. Another thing is not an article. Actually, I'll point you to this article as well. Why not? Homework. There's a Charlie Savage article in the New York Times.
Yep.
A lot of New York Times today. I read a lot more than the New York Times, trust me. But he's leaked the president's new policy for counterterrorism direct action. So what we're talking about that? Yeah, exactly. What we're talking about that is we're talking about bombing people in countries they're not at war with.
Yep.
Okay. So it's not self-defense. It's
No.
only it's for outside war zones. Okay. The actual policy itself, well, we're only getting stuff secondhand from Charlie Savage because the policy has not been officially released.
No.
It's kind of good in a way. I'll just summarize it for you. It's the president needs to approve specifically the addition of named individuals to the target list. Like no one else can do it if you want to target anyone.
Yeah.
Counterterrorism operators may no longer conduct signature strikes on the basis of a pattern of suspicious activity.
Yep.
They're only allowed to take out individuals who has gone through the process.
Right.
Counterterrorism operators need to have, quote, near certainty that the targeted individual is, quote, a member of a terrorist group approved for direct action, and, quote, near certainty that, quote, no civilian casualties will result from the strike. So, I mean, like they're all nice things.
Yes.
It's a big butt, though.
Big butt.
It's a big butt. It's a Sir Mix-a-Lot sized butt.
Yes.
Number one, we only know about this because it was leaked.
Yes.
That's not a great sign. Secondly, so we have no idea of the details.
Yeah.
Secondly, it is totally classified. There's no way we'd ever know if they're actually living by this policy.
Yep.
Like and how liberally they're interpreting the words.
True.
Because it's
Yes.
all classified. Thirdly, the areas of active hostilities that they're defining as this not applying to
Yes.
includes Iraq and Syria. Like, so according to them, they're still at war in Iraq and Syria.
Yeah.
Right. So really, like, who knows where else it applies?
Yeah.
It might apply nowhere.
Yes.
The outside area of active hostility. Fourthly, Congress should be doing this. This should not be some secret document from Charlie Savage. This should be a congressional. This should be a piece of legislation. And also, since it's just some bullshit policy of Biden's, it's going to last 18 months.
Yes.
And then it'll be reversed completely.
Yep.
So these are all big problems. But, better than nothing, I guess. I just want to bring it to you because it's the kind of thing no one ever talks about.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just, that's where we're at.
Yep.
I'll put down the homework so you can read more about that. And the final thing I'm going to put in the homework is, I'm watching the clock. Don't worry, Dave.
Yep.
Is, we've talked before about high-speed rail, California high-speed rail. It's, there is a very funny article in the New York Times again, I'm afraid. If you run out of free articles, let me know in Facebook, and I don't know if it's going to get banned. They may find their way into the comment section. Pasted. I won't do it on YouTube because that will definitely get the YouTube removed. Anyway, originally in 2008, California approved a ballot question about high-speed rail. It was supposed to go from Los Angeles to San Francisco. It's supposed to cost $33 billion. It's supposed to be finished in 2020. It's now 2022, if you haven't noticed.
Yes.
The first stage of this is going to be from Bakersfield to Merced. Bakersfield is 380,000 population. Merced is a population of 84,000. Neither of them are LA or San Francisco.
No.
Neither of those cities have anything to do with the first stage. The whole project now, rather than costing $33 billion, is supposed to cost $113 billion.
Wow.
And the first stage is due to be finished in 2030. No one thinks it's going to be finished by 2030. The whole project is not due to be finished this century. This century. The story is essentially about the actual process, by the way, bureaucracy and the realities of government gradually kill with small cuts a big idea. It's really good. It's a really good piece. Because the same logics. I'm not going to go into the details, but the same logic applies to any big piece of infrastructure.
Yeah.
So you can see why it costs so much in America. Oh, this is quite a funny little punchline. SNCF was the company, the French National Railroad, that they originally got in to try and build the bullet train.
Yeah.
They pulled out in 2011, 3 years after the beginning, because I'll just quote the project manager from the bullet train. There were so many things that went wrong. SNCF was very angry. They told the state they were leaving for North Africa, which was less politically dysfunctional. They went to Morocco and helped them build a rail system. This is in 2011. The Morocco bullet train opened in 2018.
Wow.
That's the punchline. And by the way, the original sin, I'm not going to say I wasn't going to go into details, but the original sin, the first problem, and there were so many others, was they diverted the original coastal rail route to inner California.
Yes.
Because the county supervisor wanted it to go through his district.
Yeah.
And that meant going over a mountain range. And then problems started from there. So that link is in the homework.
Amazing.
Do you have anything else to add, Dr.
I
Dave?
do not have anything else to add.
Well, thank you so much for turning up because you were very sick. I know you had your cough. It wasn't too bad.
No, it wasn't too bad.
It wasn't too bad.
I was worried that it was going to sound like the audio that you never hear in the movie Grizzly Man, where the bear is eating Timothy Treadwell and Werner Herzog's just listening to it. You can never listen to this. I was worried that that's what you were going to be hearing, but no, it's actually been fine.
The you could never listen to this was me talking about environmental legislation last podcast. That was the never you can listen to this. Anyway.
All right. See you
thank
next
you so much,
week.
folks. We'll see you next Friday.
Bye.
Bye-bye.